Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 is perhaps the most beloved movie of 1987. Huge box office and widespread critical acclaim were lavished on this creepy, imaginative movie. It didn't win any Oscars, but that's probably because it was released too early in the year. The creative masterminds behind Nightmare 3 were Chuck Russell and Stephen King's #1 fan Frank Darabont. Neither contributed to Nightmare on Elm Street 4, probably because they were too busy working on a new project, a remake of The Blob. Growing up, The Blob was one of my favorite movie monsters, if only because with a little red Jell-O, you could do an awesome impression of someone being killed by the Blob. It's a shame Jell-O never used the Blob in any of their advertising. No, something tells me Jell-O is happy they stuck with their original spokesperson.
Yoo-hoo, Mrs. Beaner!
Bill Cosby!
Why not make new sugar-free Jell-O instant pudding?
The original Blob came out in 1958 and starred movie icon Steve McQueen. The Blob was one of the first 100 movies released on DVD by the Criterion Collection, which boasts itself a continuing series of important classics and contemporary films. Now, right at the beginning of The Blob 1988, I noticed for the first time how shitty the animated wings on the TriStar horse are. Maybe I've been spoiled by Pixar, but those crudely drawn wings look awful. They make the horse look real lame, like maybe it's not even a real Pegasus, and the other flying horses laugh at it. I mean, he's just jumping over that logo. Can he not fly? With wings like that, I wouldn't be surprised.
That's a first down.
So the movie starts out in your typical small-town USA, where everyone turns up to watch Johnny Football Hero in the big high school game. Meanwhile, the town badass, who fancies himself too good for all those squares with their community spirit, is out in the woods drinking beer and smoking cigarettes. When he comes to a busted bridge, he tries jumping the gap, like he thinks he's Evel Knievel or something. He winds up crashing on his ass, which actually happened to Evel Knievel more times than you'd think. Actually, it seems like every time Knievel wanted to jump a gorge or some buses, he wound up eating shit and breaking every bone in his body. No wonder that guy retired. The badass isn't the only thing crashing in this idyllic town, because soon, a cheesy meteor crashes into the woods. The only witness is the town bum, who immediately goes to investigate. Like an idiot, he starts poking it with a stick, until the blobby mess inside the meteor attaches to his arm. While all this is going on, Johnny Football Hero is getting ready for his big date. His best friend is this total date rapist, who keeps a well-stocked bar of knockout drinks in the trunk of his car. He's at the pharmacy stocking up on condoms. Well, at least he's considerate about protecting the girls he's planning on violating from STDs and unwanted pregnancies. Yeah, maybe he's not such a bad guy after all. Things get embarrassing buying condoms fast when the dude's priest shows up. You see, this was back in the 80s, before priest was synonymous with child abuse, so people still worried about offending the clergy with their petty sins and vices.
You want the ribbed or the regular?
And the pharmacist totally goes out of his way to embarrass the dude. He just can't wait to wave those rubbers in his face in front of the priest. Jeez, in this one scene you got the asshole pharmacist, the jockboy date rapist, and the creepy priest. It's like a trifecta of awfulness. So Johnny Football Hero has his big date interrupted when he stumbles across the badass and the injured bum. At the hospital, the doctor is played by the great Jack Nance, so that earns the movie at least one extra star. The Blob 1988 tries to differentiate itself from the 1950s original by making the Blob deaths as gruesome and gory as possible. In the first movie, the Blob just kinda sneaks up on people, and they die off camera. Blob 1988 revels in close-ups of dissolving flesh. It's pretty much the perfect movie for a 10-year-old. So the Blob is moving its way across town, gobbling up everyone in its path, good and bad. I remember seeing this back in '88, and being blown away when the Blob ate the little kid. You never see kids getting killed in horror movies. I understand now how painful it is for grown-ups to see a child die. It just makes the movie not fun anymore. But when I was 10, seeing that kid gobbled up by the Blob made me feel like the movie wasn't condescending to me. I felt respected. The most famous scene from the 1950s Blob was the theater attack. Here's a bunch of fans reenacting the moment. There's a weird bit where one of the extras pauses so he can cop a feel off the policeman's ass. So, of course, Blob 88 has to have a theater scene too. The projectionist is reading a comic book, which on closer inspection turns out to be an issue of Wasteland, one of DC Comics' early mature titles. It was an anthology of horror, gross-out, and bizarre stories. One of the main writers of Wasteland was Del Close, the actor who plays the creepy priest.
This has all been prophesied.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in here about a big Jell-O monster. The movie is kind of progressive, the way they have the girl at the end defeating the Blob.
Come on, you son of a bitch.
Oh, never mind. She fucked up and Matt Dillon's brother had to swoop in and save her. I'm kind of surprised that in the 30 years since Blob 88, we haven't had a remake. Well, maybe that's for the best. Perhaps Jell-O monsters belong in the 80s. And speaking of Jell-O monsters...
Can Bill Cosby stay for dinner?
Shenanigans. It's been a lot of fun, shenanigans. But now we've got to run. It's funny how the minutes seem to fly.